All right, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Rob Shums. I'm the founder of Reason Prep. I do SAT, ACT, SAT subject tests in math, chemistry, and literature. I also help with AP tests, college admissions, college essays. So any questions you might have on anything related to SAT, ACT, all that stuff is fair game. So I'm going to give people a few minutes to wander in, and then we will get started. So if you want to ask a question, you can either type it into the chat, that's totally fine, or you can send an email to ask@reasonprep.com. And that's especially useful if you have a question from an SAT or ACT that you want to review, that you want to send me a picture of, for example. But anytime you ask a specific question, like from a specific SAT or ACT or subject test or whatever, please include the answer. And if possible, the source of the question and a picture. The more information, the better. It just helps things go smoothly. I don't have to ask for what the answer is or look up the answer or anything like that. Just makes things smooth. So if you want to send me questions that way, you can send an email to ask@reasonprep.com. I'm periodically monitoring my email inbox, and you can also ask them in chat if you like. All right, so if you are interested in my courses, I'm sure a lot of you who have found me already know about my courses, but just in case you don't, there's a link right below. Just type it in rprep.co/courses. You'll be taken to the listing of my courses for both SAT and ACT. I've got free courses, I've got paid courses, full courses on all of the sections of both tests, so feel free to check that out. All right, so I got some questions starting to come in. Let's get started. All right, so do this, do this. That's a little big. Let's make that a little smaller. Hi, I love your videos. Thank you. I was wondering if a 28 composite score is okay for the ACT. Also, do you know how that converts to on the new SAT scale? Yes, that's a pretty solid score. I can give you the conversion to the SAT. So that would be equivalent to, again, this is approximation. You got to take it with somewhat of a grain of salt, but this is approximately like, I would say, in the range of 1310 to 1340. So you're probably looking at, I don't have an exact percentile. Let me see if I can get the percentiles for this. So ACT percentiles. Because really, in the end, whether it's a good score or a bad score, what matters is how it helps you for, is this it? How it helps you get into the colleges you're looking at. Yeah, this is it. Right, so that's what matters in the end, right? What colleges you're applying to, is a 28 in that range? A 28 should open up a lot of opportunities in many different schools. So yeah, it's very solid. It's about a 1310 to a 1340, and the percentile is 90th percentile. So top 10%. Think of it that way. It's a top 10% score. That's very, very good. So this is 90th percentile. So always think of it in terms of percentiles. Think of it in terms of what colleges it might open up for you. And you can also think of it as an SAT equivalent, but I think these two are more useful. So yeah, good stuff. Hi, YOLO. Next question. What are good ways to study for the SAT? I've taken the SAT once, but for some reason I'm stuck and lost in what I should study and how I should study besides Khan Academy. So Khan Academy, definitely a good resource, more so I think for math and for writing than for reading. I've talked about this a lot in previous live streams. It's a good resource, but certainly it's not enough, right? You're going to need some other kind of assistance, whether it's books, courses, tutoring, something in addition to Khan Academy and practice tests. So let me just list out some resources you can use. I have a study plan course. It's a free study plan course that goes through a lot of this and talks about the different ways to set up a study plan on your own. So check out, again, the link below. It goes into more details on this, but let's go through the gamut here of what you should be using or what you could use. So practice tests / practice sections, very important. I talk about how to use them in a lot of my courses, in the study plan course, for example. Let me just add that this is free. So that's a huge resource. That's going to be the core of your program, the core of your studying, because you want to use real material as much as possible. Second thing would be, well, we already have like Khan Academy. That would be useful as well. Again, supplemental targeting your resources. My YouTube channel, which of course you already know about because you're watching this video. This live stream. My YouTube channel got a ton of videos. I release videos a lot on the SAT and the ACT, but also the SAT. So make sure you can work your way through those. My video courses on my website, reasonprep.com, can help you with this. Both free and paid courses. What else? Books. So I get a lot of questions about what I think the best SAT prep book is, and my general advice on this is to go with books that are by tutors, by independent professionals. The third-party big box books like Princeton Review, Barron's, etc., they're okay for additional practice, but I think I generally find better material with tutors' books. So there's plenty of stuff out there. Pone the SAT for Math is good. Erica Melcher's stuff on verbal, on the English and the reading and the grammar, that's good as well. So books. Of course, tutoring in classes, and that goes without saying, if that's an option. Obviously not if you're looking for a self-prep, but just throw it out there. Another thing you could do is flashcards, and I talk about this as well in my study plan course. So flashcards for vocabulary, for math formulas, for grammar concepts, for whatever can help add some structure to your studying. So yeah, I would say this is some of the resources you could use in addition to Khan Academy. But check out my study plan. I specifically go through how you set up a study plan, the kinds of activities you should be doing in the study plan, daily, weekly, how often you should study, how you should break your studying up, how much you should be studying per day. It's all in my free study plan course. So I would redirect you there for a more comprehensive explanation, more comprehensive explanation or guidance on how you might study more effectively. Okay. How close is the PSAT to the SAT? I got a 1480 on the PSAT, but I don't know how that converts. So theoretically, the way they've designed the PSAT is this should be, at least the theory goes, what you would have gotten on an equivalent SAT if you had taken the SAT on that date. So in theory, this should be equal to your SAT score. That's essentially the theory of how it maps. That on if you had taken the SAT that day instead of the PSAT, you would have gotten a 1480. They do this by making the curves of the SAT versus PSAT work out in a certain way. Now that's the theory. I've seen when you actually take the test, it kind of bounce all over the place. So we have to keep in mind that often when you take the SAT, it's later in the year, so that might make a difference. But I've seen students very often do better on the real SAT than their PSAT score would warrant, and I see some students do not as well as their PSAT report. I will say just on average, statistically, so the claim goes, it should be equivalent to your SAT score. That should be kind of your baseline. So that's good news, obviously, so 1480 is really solid. But again, you really have to ultimately take the test and see how it bounces out for you, even though it's an average, even though it's statistically average. Everyone's different, circumstances differ, so you might end up a little higher or lower. But I wouldn't expect you to be too far, either in the high or low direction from this score, unless you've done a lot of prep or you're significantly older, anything like that. What is a good score for SAT 2? So my general advice on this, on subject tests, Math 1, Bio, Math 2, Chemistry, etc., 750 plus is really what you're looking for to be a very solid score. Beyond that, if you can get 700 plus, I think that's probably acceptable. Less than 700 is not ideal. I mean, it depends exactly, if you're looking at 690, 680, 670, it's okay. But really, at minimum, you want to look for 700 plus, if possible, 750 plus. I think that's where you're going to get most of the value out of those scores. Okay. I plan to take the SAT Math 2 subject tests, and I'm very nervous as to what to expect. My SAT tests, I've been hitting 700 plus, but I'm not sure how different the topics are and how to study. So the first thing you definitely need to do to address this is take a practice SAT 2. SAT Math Level 2 test. Because you need to get an idea what the test is like, not only due to the content, but also the format of the test, the timing. You only have an hour to do 50 questions, so the timing can sometimes be a bit tricky. So you definitely should take we'll add in here, a real practice SAT Math Level 2 test. That should be your first order of business to see where you're at. You need an idea of, so a 700 plus on the SAT is really nice for the math. That may not completely translate to the subject test because the subject test is harder. It does include more Algebra 2 topics and even a touch of kind of pre-calculus type topics. So it is harder than the regular SAT math. In terms of how to study, it's a little bit tougher for SAT subject tests because there's just not that many of them. What I recommend is you should get a prep book. This is where I think unlike for the SAT or ACT, I think a third-party big box prep book like a Princeton Review or a Barron's is where you're going to want to go for this. So generally speaking, Princeton Review is easier than the real thing, whereas a Barron's is harder. So if you can swing it, the ideal would be to get both, get the Princeton Review and the Barron's or some equivalent. If you can only get one, I'd probably get the Barron's just to be thorough. But if you can get both, that's good. I also have courses on my website for both, well, for the Math 2 test. So you might want to check that out. Go to the link below, rprep.co/courses. It's not a complete, it's not a course that goes through all of math up to pre-calculus because, of course, that's absurd. There's no, that would be, I don't even know, hundreds of hours long of video, and no one's going to watch that. What it is I go through the 2 released official math tests in addition to some bonus problems that they've released, question by question, reviewing the concepts as we work through the question. So it's solution videos, but we also review the concepts. So you might want to check out my Math 2 course as well. So those would be the ingredients of what you want to do. The most important thing right now, though, is definitely to take a practice test, see where you're at, get an idea of your level, and then isolate the weak topics that you have problems with and work on those with the prep book, with my course, with a tutor, a class, whatever you might end up taking. And yeah, that's basically the formula. What is the best way to search for universities? To be honest, college and the college search is not really an area of expertise for me. I know college admissions, obviously test prep, college admissions essays, and just general ideas about, how to put together an application, things like that. In terms of finding colleges, it's not really my thing. I'm sure there's a bunch of great websites out there that let you do this. The main thing is you're probably going to want to filter by location, filter by, GPA/test scores so you can get an idea of what range you might be in, filter by tuition, whether it's public or private, filter by the size of the college. So I'm sure there are websites out there. If anyone in chat wants to leave some suggestions about where to look for colleges, that would be useful. If I were to start now, if I were to look, I would just start Googling things and just see what I would find, honestly. Because like I said, I'm not super up on how you find colleges particular to your needs or your goals or your scores or anything like that. For practice, is Khan Academy sufficient to get a good score? Sure, maybe. It's possible. I can't say for certain. I mean, for some students, yeah, that's all they'll need. For others, no. What's good about Khan Academy is you get a lot of practice questions. Not so good with the reading. I've talked about this before. The reading I don't quite like, but the math is pretty good sometimes, and the writing is good. So it works. It integrates with the practice test, which is really nice. So there's some really good uses to it, but you don't really learn strategy. There's no. I think he has some videos on some. You can obviously use the math videos to learn math and things like that, but there's no real videos or content particular to the SAT. Because here's the thing: they're partnering with the College Board, so. And that gives them a leg up because they can, integrate with the College Board systems and they can use College Board material, and that's awesome. But they're never going to cross the College Board, right? Like if there are strategies and shortcuts you can take to short circuit all of, for example, in the reading section or the math section to avoid, what the College Board wants you to do, or if there are weaknesses in the test that you can exploit, which I do think there are. Khan Academy is not going to tell you that, right? They're going to play the party line. They are on board with the College Board. So you're not going to get an unorthodox perspective. You're going to get the party line, essentially, right? So there's only so far in some cases Khan Academy can go. That said, yeah, try it. If you might be able to do it. I just can't say specifically in your situation. It just depends too much. But it's absolutely can be a core part of your study program. For some people, it's the only thing they've used and they've done well. Fantastic. But I would say if it's not enough, you might have to search out other resources, such as books, courses like my courses, tutors, classes, things like that. But yeah, it's definitely something you can use, and it can definitely help. Should I take practice test math 1 before studying, or should I leave it to the end before test day? No, I wouldn't leave it that late. You want to leave a decent amount of time between your last practice math subject test and the real thing to give you enough time to adjust. So I would say you should probably take your last math 1 test a couple weeks, 3 weeks maybe before your test day to give you enough time to adjust and adapt. This is the problem with subject tests. There's just not that many tests out there. It stinks, but that's just the reality. So we have to use them carefully. We have to use them sparingly. I assume this is about the Math 2. I believe this is the same person that asked about Math 2. So this is about the Math 2 subject test. Before I take the test, is the format the same as the SAT? Meaning, does it have fill-in problems? So it is all multiple choice, 50 questions. A significant difference is there are 5 choices, not 4, like there is on the SAT. So A, B, C, D, E. Also, there's the old guessing penalty, as it was called, that the SAT used to have, doesn't have anymore, but is still in effect for this test. So on the subject tests, whether you're taking Math 1, Math 2, Chemistry, Bio, whatever, if you get a question right, of course you get +1 raw point. If you leave it blank, if you omit it, you get no credit, as you would expect. If you put down an answer and get it wrong, not only, of course, do you get no credit, you actually lose a quarter of a point. So getting questions wrong hurts you beyond not getting the credit in the first place. So you want to be very careful with guessing. You don't want to ever guess if it's just a random guess out of 5. The only time you should guess on subject tests is if you are down to 2 choices or 3 choices. Then you can guess, but otherwise don't. So those are the major differences. You've got 60 minutes to complete the test. This is true for any subject test, so timing is a little bit tricky. That's the basic structure. There's no grid-ins, no fill-ins. It's all multiple choice. What are some topics in the Math 1 subject test? So very similar to, in fact, let me just go to the College Board website and just copy and paste their listing, because that'll be more thorough than me just like throwing out random stuff. So I'm just going to the College Board website. Topics in the test. This is perfect. I'll put this on the screen for you guys. This is for Math 1. Just all I did to find this is I Googled Math 1 subject test, and this was like the first one that came up. So here's your list. Numbers and operations. So a lot of stuff you would see on the SAT 1, regular SAT, ratio, proportions, counting, number theory. Some stuff you wouldn't, like matrices and sequences. You've got, of course, your algebra, different functions, linear, quadratic, polynomial, exponential, a lot of stuff you'd see on the regular SAT. Then you got geometry, a lot more than you would see on the regular SAT. So area, perimeter, triangles, circles, coordinate geometry, some trig, and then some basic statistics. Again, a lot of stuff you would see on the SAT. So there is quite a bit of overlap, I think, between this subject test and the regular SAT. But there's also harder stuff. It goes more into algebra 2. It goes more into trig than the subject test, than math, than the SAT math, excuse me, the full SAT, regular SAT math does. Okay, where am I? Here I am. Sorry, I'm just working out my inbox here. Okay. All right, so more questions. Let's see what else we got. If I take the ACT, should I take subject tests? Depends. Some colleges, if you take the ACT, don't require you to take subject tests because there is the science component, so they kind of get the science aspect of your background through the ACT. But it depends on the colleges, really, in the end. Depends on college or the university. So you have to check their requirements. They'll tell you. I think in many cases, though, once you've taken the ACT, subject tests are redundant. They won't be required, perhaps recommended. But again, depends on the college. Check with each college. It's going to depend on their requests. How do I create an ACT study plan? I'm taking the ACT in September. So I have a full course on this. Instead of just repeating everything I say in the course, which would be kind of redundant, check out my study plan course. The whole idea behind it, I'll give you the basic outline of how it works, is study plan course, reasonprep.com. It's free. Free. The basic idea behind creating a study plan for the ACT, this also applies to the SAT, is as follows. This is the basic outline. Test is in September. She should be studying, let's say, 5 to 6 days per week. Each day you should dedicate to a different test. So one day English, the next day math, the next day reading, the next day science, rinse and repeat from there. Each day you can be doing various things to prepare. You could do a timed section from a real ACT, a real English section, or a real math section, a real reading section. You would take it timed. You would check your answers. You would review your answers, review every question, especially at first, especially the ones, of course, you got wrong, but even ones you got right. Review your answers. There are books, courses, like my courses, for example, that will go through the solutions to those questions. That's the core activity. It's doing timed practice sections. Do a full practice test, I would say, every 2 to 3 weeks about. You definitely don't want to do full practice tests after full practice tests. You do want to break it up. Other things you can do include reading prep books if you're using a prep book, working through their exercises, working through video courses like my courses. You can go to the link below this picture here, rprep.co/courses, to learn more about those. There are courses you can take. If you've got a tutor, your tutor, he or she might give you specific things to work on. If you're working on a class, they'll give you some stuff. You can do flashcards. You can do worksheets and packets. So it really depends on what resources you have, what weaknesses you have, what you want to work on to improve. So it's hard to give really targeted advice, but my study plan course does help you figure out how to set up a plan of your own. And that's the basic idea. Generally speaking, I advise studying about an hour to an hour and a half per day. Do so consistently. You don't want to take many days off because the whole idea is to do a little bit at a time, and that will build your strength up over a longer period of time, much more effective. And yeah, that's the basic outline. So more details, check out my study plan course. But if you have any specific questions, feel free to follow up and I can try to address that. The more detail, the better. approximately how much trig is on the ACT. So a decent amount. I would say 4 to 5 questions per test. You're going to see, your typical SOHCAHTOA, inverse trig. I'll just type it out. So the kinds of things you'll see: SOHCAHTOA, inverse trig. Sorry for hitting that. Degrees and radians, unit circles, law of sines, law of cosines, trig equations, trig identities, trig graphs. So you're going to see 4 to 5 questions per test. You're not going to see a question of all of these categories in every test. It will differ. But it's basically what you would have learned in a Algebra 2/Trig class is essentially where we go. Maybe even sometimes, depending on the way your schools work, touching into a pre-calc kind of situation. So the trig can get kind of advanced sometimes. Those are the topics. Again, not every single one of these appears on every test. You're not always going to see a law of sines question. It is something that could show up. You're not always going to see questions about trig equations or anything like that. But this is the run of the topic, so it's pretty extensive. So if you're weak on these, it's going to be something you'll want to take a look at, especially if you need to get questions in the 40s and the 50s, right? The mediums and the hards, because that's where a lot of these ones live, especially the harder stuff, other than SOHCAHTOA. So this question is about SAT Math Level 1. Or sorry, it's about the regular SAT. Do we need to do each and every topic in math to score good? And does each topic have a similar number of questions in the test, or some more important than others? So there's definitely some that are more important than others. The SAT, if you go to the College Board website, they'll give you a breakdown of the percentages of the questions. I have a video, I actually just released it on my YouTube channel. So check out my YouTube channel. It's called, it's pretty recent. It's like the 5, let me get the title of it. It is called Top 5 SAT Math Topics to Study. So just go to my Top 5 SAT Math Topics to Study. Go to that. Look for that on YouTube. Look at my channel. That will give you a good idea of the 5, what I think are the most important topics. Certainly you need to know more than that. To kind of answer your first question, do you have to do every topic? Well, it depends what you mean by that, and depends on what good is to you. If you're looking for 700 plus, then yes, you want to be familiar with everything. If 600 plus is acceptable, then, trig wouldn't matter in that case, and some of the more advanced function questions wouldn't matter. But if you're going for 700 plus, then yes, you should be familiar with everything. And there's not much compared to the ACT especially. It's pretty shallow test. There's not as many topics on the SAT Math as there is on ACT, so that should be a benefit for you. How do I get better at doing function questions? So, without a specific example, it's hard to give basic advice. It really comes down to the same advice that I give for all reading questions, which is be very literal and strict with what the passage is saying. It's all about what's in the text of the passage. It's all about what the passage is trying to do. It's not about reading between the lines, interpretation, any of that stuff. It's about comprehension, understanding the text, understanding what the author is trying to do. The main thing with function questions is they are questions where you'll see in the answer choices, they're all verbs. It's all what the text is doing, not just what it's saying. What function does it play within the passage as a whole, right? What function does the passage play as a whole? So it's about what that text is doing. If you want to give a specific example of a question, we can take a look at that. Otherwise, it's just hard to give more advice than that. I go through this in my reading course in some more detail, but like I said, if you want to give a specific example, we can get more fine-grained about it. Okay, question on ACT reading. Should we annotate while taking the reading test on the ACT? No. I know some prep companies and tutors may recommend that. I do not. I've got a lot of reasons why I don't think it's a good use of time. My ACT reading course goes into more detail about this, but no. Annotating, which means like underlining the passage, writing in the margins, writing notes about the passage, generally speaking, is for most people going to be a waste. It's going to be not a net positive. Now, in the end, try it, see if it works for you. Like, if it makes you understand the passage better and you get a higher score, then do it. My position is, for most people, it's not going to be useful. So it's not something generally I recommend. And you certainly don't need to do it to get a 36. I don't annotate the passages and I get a 36. And a lot of people don't annotate the passages and they get high scores. So even if you wanted to do it, you could, but it's certainly not required to get a high score. And my guess is, again, I have nothing to prove this, but my guess is that it would not be. I lost my train of thought. My guess is most top scorers wouldn't be annotating. Again, I have no proof for that, but that's just intuitively I would think that. At first, I took the ACT just to try it out, but I'm thinking about retaking it to improve from my 28 and receive a 32 plus. The only issue during the test was the science. Yeah, that's pretty good. If you just tried it out and you got a 28, I think you're in line to do a lot better. Certainly, the science section probably threw you for a loop, since it's very different from the SAT if you're more an SAT person. But that can be improved. I mean, if you got a 28, you must have done pretty well on it already. So yeah, I definitely give you my blessings to try it out. I think you've got some really good potential there. How much trig is on the SAT? Not much. 1 to 2 questions per test. Unlike the ACT, it's much more limited. SOHCAHTOA, degrees and radians, unit circles, and what's the other one? Oh, common trig angles, like 30, 45, 60. That's it. There's really not much. So yeah, 1 to 2 questions. For most students, if you're not going for a 700, for example, it's not going to be something really relevant. If you are going for 700 plus, then you want to pay attention to it, but it's not a huge thing. There's so much more important about the test. Okay, a follow-up about the ACT. Okay. I scored 32 plus in everything on reading and English. My math was decent, but 23 in science dropped my. So it's hard to give. You'll have to ask a more specific question about the science, because, you know, how we approach the science section, I could talk about that for an hour. So if you want to narrow it, you can. I'll follow up on it. I do have a course on the science section, so you might want to check that out. But otherwise, yeah, the one thing I would say is how do I say this? It's easier than it looks. The test, I think, is meant to be intimidating. And certainly, you know, if science isn't your thing, you don't like science, you haven't taken many advanced courses, then maybe, yeah, it'll be kind of legitimately difficult. But I think for many students, it's more of an intimidation thing. That you have to get over how complicated it seems and realize that for many of the questions, the answers are actually quite simple once you cut through all of the seeming complexity and kind of see actually how simple the questions might be. So if you want to narrow that a little bit, I'd be happy to follow up. Otherwise, yeah, check out my science course. I've also got science videos on YouTube that go into a lot of detail about the science test as well. Okay, question. Let me see if I can find this. Hi, Rob. I would like to know, how would I know my progress on reading sections after practicing 5 official practice tests? There are only 2 categories that the College Board differentiates: COE, which is command of evidence, and WIC, which is words in context. How would I pinpoint my mistakes? I'm your member and I've watched your reading videos. However, my score is still around 29 to 31. Plan to get at least a 35. You also included in this your score reports, which I'm obviously not going to put on the screen. Also your question and answer. It's a little bit hard to tell, unfortunately, without the test. It's hard to tell what these mean. I mean, let me just see if I can get anything by looking at the... breakdowns. Which one was this one? SAT was your March one. So what I'm going to do for you, you made a good improvement though. Oh, 60 points. Yeah, it's pretty good. What I'm going to do for you, this person who sent me the score report, I'm going to follow up with you by email because I think it's going to get into your personal stuff. So I'm going to leave it there. With the writing course, so here's a follow up. We can talk about this. Wait. Let's do this. For writing, there's no secret. There's really not much to explain. You got to learn the rules. That's it, right? If you're writing scores of 32, there's certainly some grammar rules you're not getting. So there's really no secret there. Unlike with the reading, which is more complicated. So use my writing course. Rewatch it if you watched it already, and of course, if you haven't watched it, certainly watch it. Learn the grammar rules. That's about it. In addition, there's some rhetorical skills questions, which is more of a reading thing, which I'm guessing is probably an issue. I go through that in my writing course as well. Pay attention to the 4 principles in my course. For writing, there's no secret. It's not complicated. Learn the rules. They're the same rules again and again. Learn the rhetorical skills principles, and yeah, you should be able to get that to at least a 35. Reading is trickier, so I'm going to follow up with you personally about that because it's going to be particular to your situation, so I'll email you back. Probably not today necessarily, but well, maybe today. We'll see, but certainly by tomorrow. What do they look for on the essay portion of the ACT? There's 4 things they're going to look for. There's 4 scores you get: ideas and analysis, development, and if I can spell development, and support. Organization, and language use. I go into this in more detail in my ACT essay course, but to give you the basic rundown, the main thing you want to make sure you do, and what a lot of students don't do, well, 2 things. 1, make sure you have your own perspective or thesis on whatever the topic is, whatever the perspectives are. If your essay is just like summarizing the 3 perspectives they give you without your own point of view, you're going to run into problems with the ideas and analysis score. The second thing is be specific, be detailed, try not to be superficial. When you're talking about the perspectives, try to give examples, try to use reasoning to explain why the perspective you're talking about agrees with your perspective or disagrees with your own perspective, with your thesis, whatever it may be. That's the development and support score. Yeah, those are the main 2 things. Have your own thesis, your own perspective, and then 2, relate the perspectives given to your own thesis and be specific. Give examples, give reasoning, explain why they relate to each other the way they do. Oh, and 3rd point, write as much as you can. Try to get to at least 3 pages, if not, more than 3 pages. How do you approach the science section without the chart graphs and charts? Do you want us to read the whole thing or just look at the key details? I'm assuming you're meaning the conflicting viewpoints questions. Conflicting viewpoints passage, I'm assuming that's what you mean, which is the one without graphs and figures. It's 7 questions. It's got like scientist 1, scientist 2, scientist 3, or student 1, student 2, student 3. For that long passage, I actually do recommend reading it quickly to get a sense of what they disagree about. And then you go to the questions. What you do then is you go to the questions. Don't do them in order. Do the questions that talk about one scientist or one student first. Then do the questions that compare and contrast more than one student or scientist, and then leave the ones that are about the entire passage to the end. That's the basic order of how you approach them. But yeah, do read the whole thing, give it a quick read, then do the questions from most specific to most general, from questions about one scientist or student to questions about more than one scientist or student to questions about everybody or everything about the passage. I go into more details on this in my YouTube videos. I think I've got a video on this, and also in my science course. I definitely go into a lot more detail about this. Question about SAT essay. So I know you always recommend practicing the essay section and the SAT timed, but how far do you recommend practicing the prompts untimed? Not very. I think you can perhaps do that once just to kind of get used to things, but you got to get used to that time pressure. That's a huge aspect of the SAT essay. Even though you do have a decent amount of time to do it, it is still something you have to get used to. So I wouldn't really do much about untimed. I mean, you said the follow-up, you say you would love to try timing yourself. There's some days where you can't. I mean, you don't have to do a practice essay every day, so do the essay when you have the time to time yourself, really. I don't really know what you mean by there. Some days you can't. I'm not sure what you mean by that. So if you want to email me again and follow up on that, I'd be happy to address it. But yeah, I wouldn't do that many untimed. If you're going to do them untimed, I would do them at first, like do 1 or 2 or 3 untimed, I guess. And then once you switch to timed, never go back, because you got to get used to that time management when you're dealing with the SAT essay and even the ACT essay. It applies there as well. Okay, let's continue. Okay. So we're going to continue this for another 18 minutes or so. That's the upper limit. If you have more questions, feel free to send them. If we run out of questions, we'll end early. But like I said, we'll be here until 9 o'clock Eastern time, so 18 minutes. Whoops, that's not right. Is there a need to get both the Princeton Review and S. Kaplan test prep? You already have Barron's and official. So for the SAT, the regular SAT, no. If you have one third-party test prep book, you don't need more than one. So if you have Barron's, you're fine. No reason to get Princeton Review and Kaplan in that case. Where you might be picking up what I said before is with the subject tests. That's different. With a subject test, I recommend getting a Princeton Review and a Barron's, or a Kaplan and a Barron's, something like that, just because of the way there's just not as much test material available for those. But for regular SAT, no. Once you have one book, there's no real reason to get another one of the kind of third-party test prep. You can if you want, but there's no like requirement to do so. And then a follow-up on that. Do we need to do the same topic from each book, or are they for practice only? I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. Well, I think it kind of answers the question itself, because you don't need more than one book. So get that one book, work through that one book. You should be good. No reason for the SAT, the regular SAT, to double up. So there's a question which I'm going to address actually in chat in the stream, because someone asked it, and it'll be easier for me to type this part out. So the question is there, where do you find a schedule for future live streams? So there is no schedule that's currently regular. I basically do a session at different times every week, varying it up because people are in different time zones, different needs, so I just changed it up a bit. But let me give you places where you can find out when the next one's going to happen. So the first would be the main live stream page on my website. Let me actually do this. Let's do this. So if you go... Okay, let me switch this over. Okay, so if you go to my website, reasonprep.com, you go to, just I guess, yeah, the bottom. Just look up the live streams. You can look in the start here. There's a lot of places to find this. You can just type, live streams and, well, I can't type with one hand. Live streams, whatever. You'll find it. And on this page here, I tell when the next one's going to be. You can also sign up for my mailing list. I email when the next sessions are going to be, so you know exactly when they're going to happen. That's one place to find it. The second would be my YouTube channel. So if you go to YouTube, well, let's just do the link. Let's do it this way. Let me switch back over. So if you go to YouTube and look up my channel, you can find, so one is this link. You can just look at it on my website. Second would be my mailing list. Third would be, which you can sign up for on my site. Third would be the Facebook group that I have. If you haven't joined it, again, you can go to my website, find out more about my Facebook group. 4 would be my YouTube channel. Those are the major places to see when the next stream is. I usually announce it with a few days notice. So, yeah, you should be able to see when the streams are happening then. Okay, specific question about college major. Unfortunately, I don't think I'm going to be super helpful with this, but I'll put it on the screen. Maybe somebody else who's watching will have a better answer than I will. Hope to major in environmental studies in the future and also food science. Is it recommended to major in environmental studies and minor food science? Well, I can kind of answer that one. And maybe it's up to you. I mean, it really depends on what you like better. There's also potentially the possibility to double major, perhaps. Yeah, it's just which one you like better. If you're going to pick one to major in, should be fine. It's up to you. I don't think there's any right or wrong answer here. It's just about what you want to do. In terms of colleges, I don't really know any. I know Cornell has a good food science program, I believe, so I'm sure they probably got a good environmental science. I'm a Cornell student, so of course I'm going to recommend them. But their agriculture school actually might not be a bad fit, to be honest. Maybe. So Cornell Ag could be where you'd want to go. That's one, but again, I'm not super much of an expert on this, so yeah, it's hard. This is where, like I said, my knowledge falls through a little bit. I don't really know good schools for these particular majors, but yeah, start with Cornell. Take that and see if you can get schools similar to Cornell's agricultural school or agricultural college, and you should maybe find some other leads based on that. All right, so about 12 minutes left. If there are no other questions, we'll end early. Otherwise, I'm going to go till 10. Okay, I've got a question here. Can you go over arc length? Sure. So this is for both SAT and ACT and even SAT subject tests. The main thing with this stuff is don't overthink it. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to come up with a question, and we'll have you guys try this one out on your own. So here's a circle, and we're going to mark this arc length green. The radius of the circle we're going to say is 8. So the radius is 8. And let's say we're told that this is, I don't know, 45 degrees. And we want to know what is the length. What is the length of the green arc? And we'll call that AB. So you're given the radius is 8, 45-degree central angle. We want to know the length of that green arc. So I'll give you guys a minute or two to try this one out on your own. If you want to post your answers in chat, that would be cool. You don't have to. I'll give the answer in a second. And in fact, I'm going to have to solve this. So we're all going to take a couple minutes to solve this. I'll be right back. Got to get my calculator, and then we'll go from there. So go ahead, take a minute or two, see if you come up with an answer for this problem. Okay. So, what's the answer to this one? Now, there's a formula for these. I guess the general formula you can use for this if you want to go to the formula route, and I'll show you another way to do it in a second, which is basically like the formula, but it's more intuitive, is you do theta over 360 times 2 pi r, or if you're in radians, theta over 2 pi times 2 pi r, where theta is this angle in the middle. So if you plug this in, theta is 45, r is 8, you'll get the answer, which in this case is going to be 6.28. Now, what's the more intuitive way to get this one? And this is the way that I like. It kind of explains where this formula comes from. And it works like this. The first thing we can figure out is what is the circumference of this circle. The circumference we know is 2 pi r. So in this case, it's going to be 2 times pi times 8, or 16 pi. All right, fine. We know this green segment, this green arc, I should say, is some fraction of the 16 pi, right? It's not the whole thing. It's just a piece of it. What we can figure out is what fraction it's supposed to be, and the key measure here is going to be that central angle of 45. The total number of degrees in a circle is 360. So this wedge would represent 45 out of 360 degrees of the circle. That is the fraction of the circle this wedge represents. And accordingly, it is also going to be 45 out of 360th of the area of the circle. And, importantly for our purposes, 45 out of 360th of the arc, of the circumference. This reduces to 1/8, right? Yeah. So what this is telling us is this is 1/8 of the circle. So this green segment is going to be 1/8 of the circumference, which is 16 pi, and that's 2 pi. So 2 pi is correct. You got the right answer for that one, right? So that is totally right. So 2 pi or 6.28, either of those would be correct. So yeah, that's how you do it. The key is to understand this central angle tells you what fraction of the circle you're dealing with. So from here, we could get the sector area. The sector area would just be 1/8 times pi r squared times the area. So 1/8 times pi times 8 squared, and that would be 8 pi, and whatever that is. So it's all about that central angle. It tells you what fraction of the circle you're dealing with, and therefore what fraction of the area and what fraction of the circumference. Follow up. Do I plug in if I have to find the radius? Depends on the problem. In most cases, you're going to either be given the radius or you're going to have to calculate it. Like plugging in your own radius, I can't see working in most cases. So if they don't give you the radius, you're going to have to find it on your own. Like sometimes, they might do something like, I don't know. They might do a circle with a square in it, and then like this, and give this angle maybe of like 40 or something. And here, and let's say they gave you the side of the square was 6, let's just say. Here, they don't give you the radius, but you'd have to calculate it. You have to calculate it by realizing, for example, that the diagonal of the square, which is a diameter, is 12. That gives you that wouldn't be 12. That would be the diagonal of the square. You'd have to calculate the length of that based on the side of the square being 6. Once you have that radius, then you would plug that in. So that's more of an advanced problem. But yeah, either they're going to give you the radius or you're going to have to calculate it, pretty much. Okay, this will probably be the last question, so it's related to reading. Would you recommend studying vocab to improve the reading section, or mostly focus on practicing reading passage and go over the answer? Mostly this. I mean, it depends exactly on your situation. I think I know you were in the 600s, I think, right? Yeah. So you might benefit a little bit from doing some vocab prep, and I have a vocab list on my website. So go ahead and check that out. It's available for free, vocab list. So you can use that to learn. So even if you do that, though, this is going to be the most important thing to do. Vocab can help to some extent, but especially short term, taking it in August. Generally, I recommend focusing on things that you have more control over. So that would be focusing on reading practice, reading sections, writing, math. You're much more likely to get more points out of your time rather than studying vocab lists. But you can try. It's not, the worst thing you could do. All right, let's make sure I've covered all the questions in the thing. I did. Okay, so we're good there. All right, so that's it for today. This recording will be up on YouTube pretty much right after the session. Tomorrow, I'm going to post a highlights video of this. So if you don't want to watch the entire stream again, I'll post a highlights video with timestamps for the most important or interesting or relevant questions. Next live stream will be sometime next week, time to be determined. In a previous part of this live stream, I mentioned where you can find updates. Go to my website, join my Facebook group, pay attention to my YouTube channel, join my mailing list, again, through my website. All of that will tell you when and where my next live streams are. All right, so with that, thanks for watching. If you want to learn more about my courses, go to the link below, rprep.co/courses. I've got free courses and full courses, paid courses on the SAT and the ACT, all sections, complete everything you need to do well on both of those tests. So go ahead and check out that link if you want to learn more. Otherwise, I'll see you all next week, and I'll talk to you later.